We're going to take a quick look at Pagelines DMS and talk about whether or not it's worth the money, if it's a step in the right direction, a step back, and just see what kind of features it has for building a website. This is a site I've been working on for a few days, and I'm not going to go into, we're not going to go into the technicality of how to do all these things with it, but just want to do a quick highlight of the pros and cons of what's going on with this, and just the basics of what DMS is and how it's different from other frameworks. Yes, I'm going to call it a framework, even though Pagelines is a quote revolutionary and not a framework. It's a DMS, but anyways, it's a framework, and there are actually other frameworks that are pretty close to what it does. But what sets Pagelines apart, Pagelines DMS apart, is this front end where you can actually edit directly on the page through drag and drop interface. Most of your frameworks, you've got a back end, and that's actually where you're going to edit your site for the most part. And then once you're done, you go to the front end. You can check it out or whatever. But with Pagelines, you directly drag and drop things where you want them, and then once you make that edit, we'll drag this over. Once you make that edit, you've actually got to click a refresh button. See, I don't know what it's doing right now. So we'll just wait and see till it's ready. Alright, so once you drag something, get in your box, you notice at the bottom right, it was really quick. It said saving, so it's saved our page, our change that we just made. But if we make a change with, say, a text box, if we make a change with the text box, then it's actually not going to, it'll still save it, but it won't make those changes until we actually reload the page, or refresh the page. And to me, that's, that kind of makes it a little bit clunky. It's not a huge deal because you have to refresh regardless if you're using the old method of building on the back end or whatever. But to me, if you've got dual monitors and I'm going to have to click refresh every time to see my changes, it's almost the same as me having my content on another monitor and click and refresh anyways. So as far as the actual time it saves, I don't know how much faster it is, because by the time you've got to hunt around for the buttons and you're dragging and dropping, if you've got a little bit of experience with code, even just HTML and CSS, I don't know that it's going to save a whole lot of time, but it is nice. It is different. It's kind of fun to actually drag things around visually and drop them. So it's, I don't know, I'm still a little bit torn on as far as the speed and efficiency on the site, on whether or not it's worth it with the framework. The way it's laid out at the top, you've got your nav bar. This is actually a sticky nav bar. I think by default it's this way. If not, there's just one little checkbox you check. It's in global options and then nav bar, and that'll make that enable fixed navigation. So it'll make that nav bar sticky at the top, so that's nice to have. And as you go on down, everything's split up into sections. Each section you can edit and you can change the background image. This one, right under where the main template starts, that's just a background image with some sections on top of it. And this is just a white section, gray section, of course with content on top of it. Some sections I dragged over there. So, it's easy to do. You just you click on your sections. And if I wanted to make a new section, I would drag it up, click it in here for a section area, and then I can go in, like I showed you, if here it goes, and it's going to give me the option to set the padding, the background image. And once I've got my section in, I'm going to drag a box or whatever into that section, and then I can change those. So it's a great interface. It's really fun to deal with. I won't say deal with, really fun to play with. But if you are nitpicky about where things are located, tiny bits of padding here and there, there's some basic options for padding and stuff, but you still may have to get in and do a little bit of code. But for something out of the box that's drag and drop, this is by far the cleanest, best looking end result you're going to get that I've seen with something for the amount of time you put into it. It doesn't take long at all just to drag and drop these. And that's, to me, that's what really sets us apart from other frameworks is, just the amount of options you have for all these sections that are already pre-built for you that you can just drag and drop in here and they're ready to go. And then all you have to do is go into each section and you can, configure it. So that's really nice to have. It's also nice that the layout is clean. They really excel with one page, and you can actually make it a parallax layout if you want. I'm not going to go into making one of those, but they're starting to be pretty popular, so it's nice that you can easily make those kind of layouts with the page if you want to. So it's definitely got its benefits. It's got its some stuff with it that's really nice to have, that if you have very little coding experience, it could save you some time. It's just, for me, having a dual monitor set up and already working with some code and being familiar with the back end, even though they try to make it in the front end, I mean, you're still going to have to, if you go into the global options and then admin shortcuts, you're still going to have to probably do some stuff with widgets, which means you have to hop back in the back end. All these are different areas that you've got to hop back and forth on. So it's the hopping back and forth. But I don't really know how they would avoid that if they're wanting to, they did a good job of trying to do everything they could on the front end. Just realize that you're going to have to go in the back and still do a little bit every once in a while. But now the cons, there's some cons with it too. I mentioned the clunkiness of it. I mentioned that to me, it really doesn't save that much time. For me, really, it's nice to have the visual editor though. But really the big cons for me is just the functionality of it. I was amazed that I don't use Internet Explorer 8, but when you go to their website, you go to pricing on their website, it's going to say that it's supported by all major browsers, including IE 10, 9, and 8. I didn't know anybody even used Internet Explorer 8. I don't really keep up with it, but I did some checking, and IE8 countdown says 10% worldwide. W3 schools still around 5%. So I don't know. You could probably assume it's 5 to 10% of people. So people using browsers, you got 1 in 10, 1 in 20 people are going to be using IE8. Depending on the kind of site you have, I mean, it may be lower than that depending on the site and your audience, but if you've got the kind of audience that you think might not really be aware that they don't need to be using IE8 and they need to take 5 minutes or less than that and download Firefox or Chrome, but you can't really help that too much with what your audience is going to be using. And if 5 to 10% of people are using IE8, to me, it should be compatible with IE8. And when I say, they say it's, let's see, we officially support all major browsers. So they say they support it, but I took a look at IE8 because when I go through these sites and I do testing with different browsers, here's a Pagelines site. This is Pagelines site in Chrome 28, I think. Looks great, right? You got these effects coming down the screen. A little bit of a lag. That's not really their fault. That's the way I've got my screen set up. But it looks great. But then if you pop over, this is their website, pagelines.com. I've got in IE10 you can do this interface. So you press F12 and you can choose your browser. I've got it set to IE8. Here's what IE8 looks like on pagelines.com. You've got this blue bar with a gradient. That's great. These aren't even lined up. They're dropping down. Here's, it's hard to read because that's falling in the background. I don't know. Anyways, it's not good. To me, and then better yet, here's the site I just showed you in IE8. So this is great. So hey client, here's your website. I know you've got XP and you don't know how to upgrade your browser, but now upgrade your browser and it's going to look great. But just make sure you're not using IE8 and nobody is using. And I know there's plugins and things you can do that can give a warning and pretty much force people to do a browser. I realize all that, and I realize you could tell your client to, go use Firefox or Chrome, but you shouldn't have to do that. And at least they shouldn't be claiming on their pricing page that it works with it when really it's not working. So that's a bit of an issue. I mean, that percentage is going to go down over the next 6 to 12 months. I mean, it's 5 to 10% now. I'm sure it'll be, half that or less in 6 to 12 months, but it's still something to be aware of. So that's a con to me, is i8. Another con, they had a rough launch with drag and drop DMS. I'm just reading the screen. With Pagelines DMS. They were hacked a couple of times. People couldn't get their pro key for a couple of days. The support forum was down for 3 or 4 days. And, granted, it's smoothed out now. People are getting their pro keys, and the forum's working like it should. But, I mean, that's not good that it was that rough of a launch. And the communication really wasn't that great from the company, the 2 or 3 days this was going on. So that was kind of disappointing, and I think it really turned off a lot of people, myself included, just the way things were handled with the whole situation. The third downside I see with it is the pricing. And granted, I don't mind. Really, the pricing to me is not a downside. I'm just making you aware of it in case you're wondering. I purchased a developer license for 2.0. I don't know, whatever it was, a couple $100. But pretty much, if you got 2.0, they're just saying, unless you bought it, I think maybe in June or something. I don't know what the day was, but for the most part, which 2.0 had a similar scheme where you have to pay a monthly fee, and the monthly fee has I think you can get grandfathered in if you're still paying it with 2.0, but if you weren't, this is the monthly fee. I mean, and that's a pretty stiff fee for a framework. I don't think that I've seen any of the frameworks I've tested have a monthly fee like this. Now they've got a community. It's it's kind of give and take. One of the biggest pros is their community they have, and they have people developing their plugins. They have all these sections available. Not to mention everything in the store. So you do have that kind of balances out the pricing a little bit. But just be aware that there's no upfront. You can. Right now, there's actually still a 10% off if you do it. I can't remember the exact date. It might be August 1st, but it's not too long after this. They're not going to have that 10% anymore. So for now, they do still have the 10% you can get locked in for on these. So you can get your pricing locked in for 10% off of that until sometime in early August. But that's still pretty hefty. And on top of that, once you get into the store, even after you pay for that, you've still got fees if you want to use, some of these store sections and stuff. You've got another $20 on top of that to pay to use some of these. So it's not cheap. But if you're a developer and you're building for a lot of clients, I think it would still pay for itself. But right now, for me, just as far as an overall view of where it's at, and I like the way it's going. I think, or at least I hope, that frameworks continue to go this direction. But just Pagelines as a company, with the way the launch went, their pricing scheme, I think they're being really aggressive with that just because they're leading the way. I think that almost too much. And then the fact that it's not compatible with IE8. For me right now, at least, I'm going to hold off on it. I've enjoyed using it. It has a lot of perks. But just too many downsides for my clients. The biggest being that, there's a 5 to 10% chance that they're not going to be able, at least the clients I have, that I'm betting some of them have XP. But anyways, since there's that chance that they're not going to be able to use their website, that's a pretty big deal to me, and that's a deal breaker, to be honest. So until they have that support for IE8, I'm not even going to consider it. But if you've got a client base that you feel pretty confident is not going to be using IE8, and you're cool with the pricing scheme, I say go for it. You can download the basic version for free, try it out, and then upgrade to Pro at any time. So check it out, see what you think. You may agree with me, you may not, but that's my take on it after using it for a few days. And you just need to check it out for yourself and see what you think.